In June of 2017, 20-year-old Cindy Evans disappeared without a trace while hiking the Appalachian Trail in the Newfound Gap region. After a long search, she was presumed dead with no clues. However, in the summer of 2019 in Tennessee, a random homeless man broke the trunk lock of a car parked outside a store, hoping to make a profit, and was frozen with horror. Inside, among the old junk, was an emaciated, living woman, blindfolded and bound. It was Cindy, who had been presumed dead for 2 years. But where she had been all this time and how she ended up in the trunk of a car, you will find out in this video. Enjoy the video. Some names and details in this story have been changed for anonymity and confidentiality. Not all photographs are from the actual scene. On June 15, 2017, at 7:45 in the morning, 20-year-old Cindy Evans closed the door of her parents' house for the last time. According to her mother, Patricia, that morning in the suburbs was unusually quiet, and the temperature barely reached 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Cindy, a biology graduate student who has always been the embodiment of vitality, had been preparing for this hike for several weeks. Her route took her through Great Smoky Mountains National Park, including the Newfound Gap area, one of the most scenic but treacherous sections of the Appalachian Trail. According to police reports, the girl was wearing gray leggings, a turquoise sports top, and was carrying a dark blue backpack with enough water for one day. According to Daniel, Cindy's father, she was an experienced hiker who spent every free minute exploring the flora and fauna of the region. At the university, she was called the student who was always in the center of attention. Patricia recalled in her official testimony that Cindy had that rare charisma that made even casual passers-by smile back. She had planned to be home by 9 o'clock in the evening in time to prepare her report for the next semester. However, as the clock crossed the 21st hour mark and Cindy's phone remained off, a chilling fear settled in the Evans home. At 10 o'clock in the evening, Daniel arrived at the Newfound Gap parking lot. According to the official sheriff's report, he found his daughter's car, a white SUV, in the same spot where she usually left it. The car was locked, and there were no signs of forced entry or struggle around it. Through the windshield, he could see Cindy's sunglasses lying on the passenger seat and an unopened bottle of water. It looked as if she had just stepped out of the car and disappeared into the thick fog that enveloped the mountaintops that night. On the morning of June 16, 2017, a large-scale search and rescue operation was announced. More than 60 volunteers and a group of experienced rangers were involved. The search coordinator noted in his report that the Newfound Gap area is characterized by sharp elevation changes and dense chaparral thickets, where visibility in some places is less than 10 feet. The exhausting days of searching turned into weeks. The canine teams working on the trail reported a strange detail. The dogs confidently picked up the trail near the car, led it about 2 miles deep into the forest, but at a junction near a rocky outcropping, the scent abruptly stopped. It was a dead sector, a zone where even professional equipment often failed. The rescuers' reports repeatedly mentioned the eerie silence of the forest that summer. Any sound, the rustling of leaves or a distant bird's cry, was perceived as a possible signal from the missing person, but the Great Smoky Mountains gave no clues. Patricia and Daniel actually checked into a small motel called Mountain Comfort, 5 miles from the park's entrance. According to the motel's owner, Edward, he saw Cindy's parents every morning, going out on the terrace and peering into the mountainsides, hoping to see a familiar silhouette. They looked at every face on the trail, asked every hiker, but heard only sympathetic denials. According to the protocol, on the 8th day of the search, a helicopter with a thermal imager was deployed. For 12 hours, the aircraft scanned squares within a 10-mile radius of the last point where the dogs had smelled Cindy. The ground temperature then rose to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, making it difficult to accurately capture thermal objects. There was not a single signal, not a single scrap of cloth or broken branch to indicate human movement off the main route. The official conclusion of the investigators of that period, recorded in case number 48723, sounded dry and hopeless. Cindy Evans disappeared without a trace on a section of the Appalachian Trail under unexplained circumstances. The forest she loved so much became a trap for her. By the end of June 2017, the intensive phase of the operation was wound down. The case gradually turned into an unsolved disappearance, leaving behind only an empty parking lot, faded postcards with the girl's smiling face, and the parents whose lives stopped on that fateful June morning. Each new day only confirmed that nature can keep secrets, and the silence of the mountain forest can be much louder than any cries for help. The light Cindy carried seemed to have finally faded away in the cold fog of Tennessee and North Carolina. More than 730 days had passed since Cindy Evans disappeared without a trace from the foggy slopes of the Great Smoky Mountains. For the official investigation, case number 48723 had effectively become a pile of cold paper in an archive. Cindy's photographs, pasted up at gas stations and roadside cafes, had long since lost their original vibrancy. Under the pitiless sun of Tennessee and North Carolina, the girl's face faded, becoming almost transparent, and the paper began to crumble at the edges. In the towns along the Appalachian Trail, she was remembered less and less, perceived as another tragic legend of the wilderness, where the forest simply takes people without explanation. However, July of 2019 brought news that broke this forced silence. The events unfolded in Sevier County, Tennessee, about 45 miles from where the girl disappeared. It was a typical stifling afternoon, with temperatures reaching 92 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity making the air heavy and viscous. The target of attention was a small grocery store on the outskirts of town called Old Threshold. An inconspicuous dark gray car had been parked in the store's parking lot for several hours, covered with a layer of roadside dust and dried mud. According to Officer Collins's report, Arthur Miller, a local man of no fixed abode, was the first to notice the car. In his statement, recorded that evening, Arthur claimed that he was simply looking for empty tin cans or any scrap metal in the dumpsters behind the store. His attention was drawn to a strange sound coming from the trunk of a gray sedan, a dull, barely audible scraping noise that at first resembled the movement of a large animal. Miller, hoping to find something of value that he could resell quickly, decided to take advantage of the owner's absence. Using an old screwdriver, he managed to break the lock mechanism. When the heavy trunk lid was flung up, Arthur Miller, according to witnesses, let out a scream that could be heard 2 blocks away. The report states that the man backed up several feet, tripped on a curb, and fell, unable to take his eyes off what was revealed inside. A woman was lying among a pile of old, dirty blankets and empty plastic canisters. She was in a semi-conscious state, her body so emaciated that her ribs were clearly visible through the thin, dirty fabric of her clothes. Her hands were tightly bound behind her back with industrial plastic clamps, and she wore a tight bandage of dark cloth that completely covered her eyes. The ruckus raised by Miller instantly caught the attention of Sarah Hughes, a store employee who was at that moment going out to the backyard to take out boxes. She recalled in her testimony, "I saw Arthur on the ground, shaking and pointing at the car. When I looked into the trunk, my breath caught in my throat. The girl was not screaming. She was only making faint sobbing sounds and trying to move deeper into the cramped space, as if the sunlight was causing her physical pain." It was Sarah who, at 16 hours and 23 minutes, made the call to the number 911. A police patrol arrived 7 minutes later. Officer Collins described the car's condition in his report as technically sound but neglected. Inside, a cap and sunglasses were on the passenger seat, but no identification or personal belongings were in sight. Most importantly, by the time the police and onlookers arrived, the car's owner had already disappeared. One of the store's customers, who had been shopping 10 minutes before Arthur's scream, recalled a man of average height wearing a dark hoodie who calmly left the parking lot heading toward the woods. When the paramedics carefully removed the woman from the trunk, they found deep scars on her wrists from prolonged wearing of shackles or ropes. She was disoriented. Her skin had an unnaturally pale, almost waxy tint, indicating a long period of sunlight exposure. It was only after the bandage was removed from her face in the hospital that one of the detectives, who had previously worked on a disappearance case in Appalachia, noticed the incredible resemblance. Despite 2 years of captivity, exhaustion, and shock, the facial features, jaw structure, and hair color indicated that they were looking at Cindy Evans. Detective Lambert, who arrived at the hospital 3 hours later, recorded the first detail in his notebook. Cindy did not recognize her own name. She responded to sounds, but her eyes were constantly searching for something in the dark corners of the room. The hospital report stated that her physical condition was critical. She weighed only 95 pounds, which for her height was a sign of extreme malnutrition. As doctors fought to stabilize Cindy's condition, Tennessee police launched an urgent search of the car. The license plate turned out to be old, issued in another state, and was later found to have been stolen from another vehicle 8 months before the events. This indicated that the person holding Cindy was acting methodically and cautiously. The Sevierville incident came as a real shock to the community. A girl who had been missing for 2 years in the mountains of North Carolina was found alive in the trunk of a car in a neighboring state. But the questions of where she had been for 730 days and who the faceless shadow driving the car was remained unanswered. The town was frozen in anticipation, and the forest around the old Threshold store seemed even darker than usual, bearing the marks of a man who had simply walked into the wilderness, leaving his living cargo to fend for itself. At 16 hours 45 minutes local time, the ambulance carrying Cindy Evans arrived at Sevier County Medical Center. The area around the emergency room was instantly cordoned off by police. According to security protocol, the girl was placed in an isolated box under the round-the-clock guard of 2 armed officers. Cindy's condition, as recorded in the report of the doctor on duty, Dr. Miller, was classified as severe psychophysical shock. Her eyes, which were used to complete darkness, reacted painfully to any artificial light, so the room was kept in semi-darkness. Detective Lambert, who led the investigation team, recalled in his later reports that the first attempt at identification left the team in a daze. Here was a person whose name had been listed as presumed dead in missing persons databases for 2 years, that her cheekbones looked as sharp as razor blades, and her skin had the grayish tint typical of people who hadn't seen the sun's spectrum in months. When the fingerprints confirmed a 100% match, the department fell silent. It was an unprecedented case, a victim who had disappeared into the wilds of the Great Smoky Mountains, returned from oblivion in the trunk of a random car. Cindy's first testimony was obtained only 12 hours after her rescue. According to Nurse Catherine, who was present during the conversation, the girl's voice was a barely audible whisper. She often interrupted, and her fingers were constantly clutching the edge of the hospital blanket. Cindy said that she spent all this time, more than 700 days, in a confined space. It was a basement. She described it as a concrete sack, where the only source of information about the outside world was the sound of rain or the rare rumble of distant machinery. She did not see the seasons changing, did not know what month or year it was. Her time was measured only by the short visits of the shadow. The most eerie detail of her story, recorded in the official interrogation report, was that she never saw her captor's face. The man always appeared in a full mask. Sometimes it was a black tactical balaclava, sometimes a heavy rubber mask that completely hid his human features. He spoke either in a barely audible whisper or used a small electronic voice changer that made his speech metallic and devoid of emotion. Investigators noted the high level of training of the perpetrator. He left no chance for visual or auditory identification. Cindy recalled that what terrified her the most was the man's knowledge. According to the victim, he knew everything about her. During their conversations, he would mention the names of her friends from the university, quote passages from her favorite biology books, and recall small details from her childhood that only her parents knew about. He spoke as if he was me, only on the other side of the mirror. The detective recorded the girl's words. This created the illusion of a complete loss of privacy and control. The kidnapper acted not like a random maniac, but like a person who had been studying his victim under a microscope for years. While Cindy was trying to reconstruct the chronology of her captivity, the task forces worked on the abandoned car. The gray sedan, in the trunk of which the girl was found, became a key piece of evidence. Inside the cabin, forensic experts found signs of haste. A plastic bottle with an energy drink was left on the driver's seat, and a receipt from a gas station dated the same morning was found on the floor. However, according to the technical report, there were no fingerprints suitable for analysis on the steering wheel or door handles. The criminal was wearing gloves. The owner of the Staryi Pori store, near which the car was found, provided the police with surveillance footage. The low-quality video showed a gray car slowly pulling into the parking lot at 14 hours and 12 minutes. A figure in a dark hoodie with a deep hood gets out of the driver's seat. The man does not enter the store, but simply stops at the entrance, as if waiting for something. When Arthur Miller approached the car and began to break into the trunk, the hooded figure was already out of the camera's view, heading toward the dense forest belt bordering road number 321. The police launched a large-scale search of the surrounding woods and checked all abandoned buildings within a 10-mile radius. It was clear that the perpetrator was acting under extreme stress or panic if he had dared to leave Cindy in the trunk of a car in a crowded parking lot, Detective Lambert noted in an internal memo. We are dealing with a cautious and methodical unsub who has made his first mistake. He is out there, and he is watching. For Cindy's parents, Patricia and Daniel, the day was both their greatest blessing and their worst challenge. When they were allowed to see their daughter, they barely recognized the broken, frightened woman as the bright girl they had seen 2 years earlier. Cindy flinched at every sound of a closed door in the hospital corridor. Her fear of the faceless shadow was so deep that she refused to sleep unless a police officer was in her room. She was sure he would return to finish what he had started on the Appalachian Trail. As the police searched for the car's owner, tension hung in the air in Sevierville as the town realized that a man walked among them who could wipe another person out of existence for 2 years while remaining completely invisible. On July 17, 2019, at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, Detective Lambert and a task force from the Sevier County Sheriff's Department went to an address that had been identified through in-depth analysis of the license plates of an abandoned sedan. Although the registration plates had been stolen, hidden body markings led the investigation to a private residence located on the outskirts of Gatlinburg, a small mountain town that serves as the main gateway to the national park. The house, numbered 142 Forest Road, was off the beaten path, immersed in the dense shade of old oaks and pines. According to the official search report, the building was an old 2-story structure made of dark wood and gray stone. Neighbors interviewed by police the same day described the place as a safe haven. According to the elderly Mr. Harris, who lived 300 yards away, the homeowner, Mrs. Eleanor, had been in Europe for more than 3 years, visiting relatives in France and Germany. The house was believed to be empty, although from time to time witnesses saw cars in the driveway and noticed a faint light in the windows of the first floor. However, no one could have imagined that behind these facades a tragedy was unfolding that lasted more than 700 days. When the Special Forces officers broke down the front door, they were greeted by the smell of stale air, dust, and cheap detergents. The first floor looked abandoned. The furniture was covered with white sheets, and there was a thick layer of dust on the kitchen table. However, the path to the basement was quite different, as Detective Lambert noted in his diary. The door to the lower level was reinforced with additional steel plates and fitted with 3 complex locks, usually used in bank vaults. behind this barrier, a reality opened up that made even experienced forensic scientists shudder. The basement had been converted into an insulated, airtight capsule. The walls were covered with soundproofing boards commonly used in professional recording studios. In the center of the room was a narrow metal bed, its legs welded to steel brackets driven deep into the concrete floor. Cindy was correct in her account. It was a concrete bag no larger than 25 square feet. In the corner was a small chemical toilet and a plastic table with an open biology book on it, the same one Cindy had taken with her on her camping trip in June of 2017. The most terrifying discovery awaited the investigators on the north wall of the basement. A veritable altar of obsession was created there. Hundreds, if not thousands, of photographs of Cindy Evans were attached to the walls with stationary buttons. The pictures showed her during lectures at the university, jogging in the park, with friends, and even in a cafe with friends. And even while sleeping in her own room in the weeks before her abduction, most of the photos were taken with hidden cameras from a great distance, through tree leaves, window panes, or cracks in doors. This indicated that the kidnapper had begun to follow her long before she set out on the Appalachian Trail. Each photo was numbered and signed in small, neat handwriting with the date, time, and even a description of her mood that day. During a detailed examination of the living room on the first floor, forensic experts found a pile of letters on the mantelpiece. It was a correspondence between the homeowner and her grandson, Frank. In the last letter, dated June 30th, 2019, the woman announced her sudden intention to return to Tennessee for health reasons. She wrote that she would arrive in Gatlinburg on July 15th and asked that the house be prepared for her arrival. This discovery became a key element in understanding the motives of the perpetrator. According to the detectives who reconstructed the events, the sudden arrival of his grandmother caused Frank to have a panic attack. He realized that she would definitely want to explore the basement or hear strange sounds from under the floor. His entire built-up world, where he was the rightful master of Cindy's life, was under threat of complete destruction. That is why he decided to act immediately. In a hurry, he tied the girl up, put on a blindfold, and pushed her into the trunk of the car, trying to transport her to another, more isolated place. However, as the analysis of the evidence showed, panic played a cruel trick on the perpetrator. He failed to securely fasten the trunk lock, chose the most crowded parking lot for a short stop, and left personal belongings in the car that would later become his sentence. Every minute of the search of the Gatlinburg house revealed new layers of his sick personality. Printouts of maps of the national park were found on Frank's desk, with red markers showing all the blind spots of surveillance cameras and areas where rangers rarely appear. The house, which seemed to be a symbol of peace and family idyll, was actually the operations center of a professional stalker. As the police brought more evidence out of the basement, there was only one question in the air in Gatlinburg. How could a person who had lived in such close contact with his victim for 2 years remain completely unnoticed by the whole world? The mystery of the old house was only the tip of the iceberg, and the true face of the shadow was still hiding somewhere in the dense forests surrounding the city. On July 18, 2019, the name of the prime suspect was officially entered into the federal search database. He turned out to be 26-year-old Frank Wood, the grandson of the owner of the house in Gatlinburg. The investigative team led by Detective Lambert immediately began a detailed study of the man's biography, focusing on his life in the period before Cindy Evans disappeared. When the police pulled up the archives of the University of North Carolina, they were presented with a portrait of a man who was described by his professors and classmates in one word: invisible. According to the university's documents, Frank Wood studied geodesy and cartography. He was 1 year older than Cindy. Professor Harris, who taught Frank's specialized subjects, said in his testimony, "He was the kind of student you barely notice in a classroom of 150 people. He never asked questions, never participated in discussions, and always took the last row by the window. His work was technically impeccable, especially the maps, but it lacked any personality. Investigators realized that it was these skills, perfect knowledge of topography and the ability to navigate the terrain, that allowed him to plan a crime in the mountains so easily. An analysis of Frank's social ties showed a complete lack of close friends or romantic relationships. However, the testimonies of students who lived in the same dormitory as Cindy revealed the chilling truth about his one-sided obsession. One of Cindy's friends, Allison, recalled an incident that occurred in the spring of 2017. "We were sitting in the university cafeteria when a guy in a dark hoodie came to our table. He just stood there looking at Cindy for a few minutes without saying anything. Cindy, who has always been the life of the party and the embodiment of charisma, politely asked if there was anything she could do to help, but he just turned around and walked away. We laughed about it at the time, calling him a weird fan, not realizing that he had already started counting down the days until she disappeared." According to the investigation, each such ignoring, but in fact, the usual lack of attention from a popular girl to a stranger, fueled Frank's morbid obsession. He began to perceive her active social life as an insult and her love of hacking as a weakness that he could exploit. In his diaries, later found in a locked closet at the university, entries were found where he referred to Cindy as a light that doesn't deserve this dirty world. He had created a scenario in his mind where he was to become her sole protector by taking her home. The detectives paid special attention to the preparation of the place of detention. It was established that in September 2016, when Frank's grandmother left for Europe, he gained full access to the house. According to bank statements, over the next 9 months, he spent more than $5,000 on construction materials, soundproofing panels, reinforced door frames, and video surveillance systems. Neighbors recalled seeing the young man unloading a truckload of concrete blocks late at night, but he explained it as repairing the foundation for his grandmother. The investigation reconstructed the events of the June morning of 2017. Frank knew Cindy's exact route because he had been following her posts on social media for several months and physically following her during her previous outings into the mountains. He chose the area near Newfound Gap for a reason. The trail passes through dense forest, where the sound of footsteps is absorbed by soft moss and fog often hides visibility even at a distance of 10 feet. He waited for her in the dead sector where the dogs later lost the trail. According to the detectives, he neutralized the girl with a stun gun, as evidenced by the characteristic marks on Cindy's back, which were discovered during a medical examination 2 years later. Another detail was found in Frank's room on campus that indicated his methodical approach. On the wall was a calendar for 2017, with a red circle around every Saturday when Cindy went hacking. The last circle was on June 15th. Next to it was a handwritten note. Homecoming Day. Frank Wood turned out to be a professional stalker who had spent years honing his ability to remain unnoticed. He was not aggressive in the usual sense, had no record of police trouble, and did not get into conflicts. He was a shadow that existed outside the attention of others until the moment came for his main project. Investigators realized that they were not dealing with an impulsive criminal, but with a man who had turned the preparation for the kidnapping into a scientific work. While Cindy was in the basement, Frank continued to lead the life of an ordinary graduate, even received a diploma, and started working as an assistant surveyor at a local company. Every day, he passed by his victims' wanted posters. His cold-bloodedness terrified even detectives. He lived 15 miles away from Cindy's parents, knowing that their daughter was locked in a concrete bag under his feet. Every day of his invisibility was a brick in the wall of the prison he had built for Cindy. And now that his name was known, the police understood. Frank would not give up easily, because he knew these woods better than he knew his own room. On July 19, 2019, Sevier County officially became the epicenter of the largest manhunt in Tennessee history. After Cindy Evans was rescued from the trunk of an abandoned car and the kidnapper was identified, law enforcement faced an enemy with a significant advantage. Frank Wood was no ordinary fugitive. His background in cartography and years spent on the most difficult routes in the Appalachian Mountains made him invisible in the wilderness. According to an internal memo from the Sheriff's Department, the search strategy was based on the assumption that Wood would not attempt to leave the state via major highways, but would hide in a familiar wooded area where he could survive for weeks. Detective Lambert, commenting on the start of the operation, noted that the logic of the pursuit had to be as methodical as the criminal himself. While hundreds of officers combed through Gatlinburg's residential neighborhoods, the analytical team focused on checking real estate leases and technical facilities within a 50-mile radius of the girls' rescue. Investigators hypothesized that if Frank had planned to move Cindy in the midst of the panic, he would have prepared a new place to hold her in advance. Over the course of 12 hours, more than 300 rental agreements from the last 3 months were processed. The key breakthrough occurred at 20:30 o'clock. While checking small private ads, the detective came across a lease agreement for a small technical room, a former pumping station near the abandoned Deep Creek Quarry. The property was registered in the name of Thomas Miller, but the contact information included a cell phone number that, according to university archives, Frank Wood used 5 years ago when he was enrolled in the university. This was the first serious mistake of the Invisible Man. The Deep Creek Quarry was located in an isolated area surrounded by rocky outcroppings and dense pine forest, which was rarely visited by tourists due to the difficult terrain. That same evening, the investigation received a second piece of incontrovertible evidence. The Forestry Service provided access to footage from hidden surveillance cameras that had been installed in a forested area 5 miles from the quarry to monitor the deer population. At 24 hours and 45 minutes the previous day, one of the cameras, mounted on an old black oak tree, detected movement. The low-quality images, taken in night vision mode, showed a man moving rapidly along a forest path. Although his face was hidden by a deep hood, details of his equipment were not revealed. The details of his equipment were identical to those described by witnesses near the old Threshold store. A dark gray storm jacket with specific reflective elements on the shoulders and a 60-liter professional climbing backpack with orange markings matched the physical evidence found in the Gatlinburg house. According to a forest ranger who accompanied the group, the area was known for its karst caves and abandoned industrial buildings, making it an ideal place for long-term hiding. Frank Wood chose an area where every step an outsider took would cause dry leaves to rustle or branches to crunch, audible for hundreds of yards. A rescue officer noted that the suspect used spider tactics. He could feel the vibration of anyone approaching his web. Around midnight on July 20, the operation was upgraded to an active cordon and gate. The Tennessee police, together with SWAT teams, began blocking all forest roads and trails leading to the Deep Creek Quarry. 3 helicopters with infrared sensors were deployed to scan the area for thermal anomalies. Investigators realized that the noose was tightening, but at the same time, tension was rising. The man who had kept the victim in the basement for 2 years was cornered and could be armed. According to the report, roadblocks were set up at all exits from the woods. Local residents were warned to stay in their homes and not to engage with suspicious persons. Detective Lambert said in a brief press statement, "We know where he is. His territory has been narrowed to a few square miles. He is an experienced hacker, but he is now exhausted and without his main weapon, invisibility." The air above the quarry smelled of moisture and an approaching thunderstorm that could make the search much more difficult with the help of aircraft. However, the darkness in which Frank Wood was used to hiding now began to play against him. Every heat flash on the monitor screens at the operation headquarters was perceived as a potential clue. The police acted with surgical precision, without making any sudden movements to avoid provoking the suspect to make a desperate move. This was the moment when the silence of the forest around Deep Creek became so tense that even experienced rangers felt uncomfortable. Frank Wood remained in the center of that silence, unaware that a phone number from his past was the very thread that led the law to his final hideout. The rocks of the quarry stood like grim giants, preparing to witness the finale of this 2-year drama, while the flashing lights of patrol cars on the horizon marked the boundaries of the territory from which there was no way out for the Shadow. On July 21, 2019, at 4:30 in the morning, the operation to find Frank Wood entered its final stage. The air around the abandoned Deep Creek quarry was soaked with moisture. The humidity reached 98%, and a thick pre-dawn fog limited visibility to 15 feet. Special forces armed with thermal imagers spotted a warm silhouette inside a dilapidated brick building that had once served as a pumping station. This was the same building whose lease agreement was the key clue for the detectives. According to the tactical report of Officer Stephen, who was the first to approach the site, the area around it was littered with sharp limestone fragments and rusty metal structures, making any rapid assault dangerous. Frank Wood found himself cornered. His path to retreat through the rocky slopes of the quarry was cut off. Physical exhaustion and extreme dehydration had deprived him of the ability to use his hacking skills. When the searchlights of the surrounding area broke the darkness and the order to surrender came over the megaphone, Wood did not resist. He simply sat on the concrete floor, holding an open map of the national park that no longer had any meaning. The report stated that he did not say a single word during his arrest, only breathed hoarsely, staring into the void in front of him. On the same day, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the first official interrogation began at the Sevierville Police Department. Detective Lambert, who conducted the interview, later described the atmosphere in room 4 as sterile and tense. Frank Wood, having received medical attention and water, looked nothing like the monster the locals had imagined. He was quiet, spoke in a monotone voice, and according to Lambert, seemed completely broken by the loss of his illusory power. Deprived of his mask and the ability to manipulate reality by changing his voice, he began to speak. According to the transcript of the interrogation, the preparations for the kidnapping of Cindy Evans lasted more than 180 days. Wood admitted that his obsession was not a random outburst. He studied every aspect of the girl's life in detail. Frank said that he spent hours in the university library, observing which books she chose to study for her biology exams. "I knew which pages she turned and which paragraphs she underlined with a pencil," he said in his testimony. He even bought the same books to feel an intellectual connection with her. A special part of the confession concerned the technical arrangement of the basement in his grandmother's house. Frank described the process of creating soundproofing with pride that terrified investigators. He spent several weeks filling every crack with a special polymer compound that absorbed any vibrations. In the basement, 3 hidden cameras were installed, connected to his laptop through an encrypted communication channel. This allowed him to monitor Cindy around the clock. Even while he was at lectures or at work, he created a system where her every move, every breath, was under his complete digital and physical control. When asked why he decided to transport her in the trunk at this particular time, Frank replied that it was a necessary measure. On July 10, 2019, he received a call from his grandmother at a clinic in Germany. She informed him that the rehabilitation process had been completed early and she was returning to Tennessee in 5 days. "My world started to fall apart," Wood testified. He was afraid that the elderly woman, despite her poor hearing, might hear sounds from under the floor or accidentally find the entrance to the hidden room he had so carefully disguised under an old tool rack. He acted in a state of acute panic, which he himself called logical regrouping. Renting a building near the Deep Creek quarry was his plan to save his property. The building was completely isolated. There was not a single residential building within a 2-mile radius. Frank hoped that there, deep in the woods, he could keep Cindy for many more years. perhaps for the rest of her life. He was preparing to turn an abandoned pumping station into a new, even more secure prison. His plan was foiled only by a series of small accidents, a broken trunk lock, and the vigilance of a local homeless man. Detective Lambert noted that the most chilling moment of the interrogation was the way Frank described his state while Cindy was in the trunk. He claimed to have felt triumphant during the ride because she was now closer to him than ever, separated only by a thin layer of metal. He did not consider himself a criminal. In his warped perception, he was the architect of an ideal life where Cindy Evans was the center of his universe. When the interrogation was suspended at 16 hours 45 minutes, silence reigned in the office. The investigators had more than 10 hours of recordings that lifted the veil over the 2 years of hell the girl had gone through. The Shadow's last confession was the key to understanding that real danger often lies not behind force, but behind a patient, cold-blooded obsession that knows how to bide its time in the darkness of basements and dense Appalachian forests. The building near the quarry where he planned to create his new project remained empty, forever retaining traces of unfulfilled horror. On January 14, 2020, the first trial in the case of the state of Tennessee versus Frank Wood began in the Sevierville District Court. According to journalists covering the trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electrifying. Frank Wood, who had looked broken and exhausted during his arrest near the Deep Creek Quarry, appeared in court in an expensive gray suit, with his hair carefully trimmed and a completely impassive expression. Next to him sat a team of new private lawyers hired by his family after the sale of some of their property in Gatlinburg. From the first minutes of the trial, the defense strategy became apparent. Wood's lawyer filed a motion to invalidate his client's initial confession. He argued that the so-called last confession was given during an acute psychosis caused by dehydration and physical exhaustion, and the detectives allegedly exerted unbearable psychological pressure on Frank. Moreover, the defense put forward a version that shocked the Evans family. Frank began to claim that Cindy was with him voluntarily. His lawyers tried to make it look as if the 20-year-old student, tired of parental pressure and academic success, was looking for salvation herself and decided to escape her life, and Frank only helped her create a safe place. However, the prosecution, led by prosecutor Sarah Miller, had evidence that left no room for such manipulations. According to the materials of Forensic Examination number 92-411, indisputable biological traces were found in the basement of the house on Lesova Road. Forensic scientists found samples of Cindy's DNA not only on the bedding, but also on the walls near the ventilation hole. In addition, fragments of her hair, which had fallen out as a result of severe stress and lack of vitamins, were found in the cracks between the soundproofing boards. The most compelling evidence was the deep mechanical damage on the metal bedposts. An examination confirmed that these furrows were left by the prolonged friction of the steel chains that Cindy was chained to. In the first months of her captivity, Prosecutor Miller asked the judge rhetorically, "How often do voluntary guests need chains on their bed legs?" Another blow to the defense's case came from Frank's diaries and the contents of his professional backpack. Laboratory analysis of the digital media revealed more than 5,000 photographs of Cindy taken over a 3-year period. Technical expertise confirmed that 98% of the pictures were taken using telephoto lenses from a distance of more than 50 yards away due to hidden obstacles. This completely refuted any claims of a consensual relationship or joint plans. In Frank's notes, dated May 2017, investigators found the phrase, "She doesn't know yet that her old life will end in June. I've already chosen the color of the walls for her." This entry became direct evidence of a deliberate and pre-planned abduction. During the hearing on January 22nd, the floor was given to medical experts. A psychologist who had worked with Cindy after her release provided a report on her condition. The document stated that the girl suffered from a severe form of post-traumatic stress disorder, disorientation in time, and panic fear of confined spaces. The professor of medicine emphasized that during the 2 years in the basement, Cindy lost 30% of her muscle mass due to restricted movement. These facts shattered Wood's attempts to portray himself as a victim of circumstance or a caring friend. Judge Marcus Henderson, in his closing remarks, noted that the defendant's behavior showed an extreme degree of sociopathy and cynicism. Frank's attempts to recant his detailed testimony were found to be unfounded, as they were completely consistent with the physical evidence found at the crime scene before he even started talking. On February 3, 2020, the final verdict was announced. Frank Wood was found guilty on all charges: kidnapping in the first degree, unlawful imprisonment, and intentional infliction of physical and psychological harm. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole for the first 25 years. Cindy Evans, who was sitting in the front row holding her mother's hand throughout the trial, listened to the verdict in silence. According to eyewitnesses, at the moment when the handcuffs clicked on Frank's wrists again, this time by law enforcement, not his own morbid fantasies, Cindy took a deep breath for the first time in 3 years. Her shoulders, which had been tense all this time, finally dropped. She was no longer property locked in a concrete sack in Gatlinburg. For her, this verdict was not just a legal document, but a symbolic return of the right to her own life. As Frank was being led out of the courtroom, he tried to look in her direction one last time, but Cindy was no longer looking away. She was looking straight ahead, knowing that the shadow that had stolen 2 years of her youth had finally dissolved in the light of justice. Case number 48723 was officially closed, leaving behind only the memory of the incredible willpower of a girl who managed to survive where time had stood still for 730 days.